Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm here with Mathew Gardener. He is a personal transformation specialist and the founder of Phoenix Rising United. Welcome, Mathew.
Oh, thanks, Edith. It's great to be here with you.
Fantastic. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what do you do now and who do you help?
Absolutely. So it's really been my life's work to arrive at this destination of being a personal transformation specialist. And in my work over the last 6 years in coaching and mentoring and facilitating and leading workshops and all those sorts of things, I just realized that human nature has the capacity to transform. And the idea of what the alchemist does, for example, is turning lead into gold. And that's really what our purpose here on planet Earth is all about. Earth is absolutely a master classroom, and we have the ability to transform any perception that we have that was previously negative into something that's positive. And that's really been my life's endeavor. And what's come out of that was actually last year, in April of 2020, my fiance passed away from terminal cancer. And that experience going through that, the grieving process, the healing process, etc., that really became the platform for what is now Phoenix Rising United, in the idea that we can always rise from the ashes. We're always having the opportunity to be reborn and to share our gifts anew and to have a new, fresh perspective on life. And the idea of burning the boats and moving into the next chapter of our life really is our purpose here, and that we don't have to carry the past. And so those are just some of the really magnificent lessons that I learned along the way.
How amazing! First of all, I'm really sorry to hear that, and second of all, congratulations for doing that, because through you, or through that experience that you what you went through, you are empowering people who are struggling with similar issues, and it's like a wave effect, and because you went through that experience, others can get the knowledge and learn how to deal with it.
Absolutely. 100 million percent. Yeah.
Fantastic. How um how would you advise people, how do they define the purpose in life?
Yeah, that's an amazing question. And I think the first thing to understand is, one of the greatest lessons that I learned with my fiance Gail's passing is that death isn't the opposite of life. Death is a part of life. And I'll start off answering the question in that respect, because every day we're going through these miniature deaths and rebirths in ourselves, our thoughts, our feelings, how we perceive reality, how we communicate with others, how we behave. And so even when we go to sleep, you could think of it as being the death of that day, and now you're being reborn into the next day. And so the idea of even understanding that death isn't something to be feared, it's just a natural process of life. It's an ending to a chapter, so to speak, as you move on to the next one. So when I think about life purpose, I don't think of it like, oh, I'm meant to be, a concert pianist, or I'm meant to be, a souffle chef or something like that, or some professional in that regard. I think of it more of like moment to moment. What am I most passionate about? And if I can take action on that, and if I can recognize the energy of what's my passion is versus what may be coming from a fear-based place, then I can really begin to put things in order. And then step by step, move by move, I'll be led to those greater things where maybe I do have some professional designation or some philanthropic project. But it really starts with just that awareness of like, am I actually in the flow of life, or am I resisting life, or am I approaching it from a place of fear?
Yeah, amazing. That's really good advice. um And what would you tell others who is struggling with low self-esteem or depression? What would be your first advice to tell them?
Well, number one is you don't have to beat yourself up for it, right? Because that just perpetuates it. And I think that's the biggest challenge that a lot of people have, is they're not feeling their best and then they judge themselves for it. And that's obviously not going to help you, get ahead. It's going to dig the hole further, so to speak. And there's still a journey of exploration in beating ourselves up, but I think eventually realize it doesn't make sense. And I use this, and I like this analogy, Edith, where in our kitchen, I'm sure you have it the same over in Europe. I've never been, but I'm assuming that we all have an oven, and then on the oven there's the range, the stove, and at any point in time you could go in there, turn on one of the burners, wait till it heats up, and then you could put your hand on the burner, and you'd scorch your flesh, obviously, and it would be very uncomfortable, and you potentially need medical treatment. Most likely you would. And we all have the option of doing that. We could all do that, but none of us, once we learn as children, like what pain is and why it doesn't make sense to do things like that, we don't do it. We don't even consider it as an option. So that's really the first step to ending the idea of low self-esteem, is realizing, well, you just don't have to do it.
Mm.
And the more you hang out with people that are inspiring and encouraging, like this group and like the summit and like all the different speakers, and you absorb this information and weave it into your life in a way that works for you, that's the beginning of that first step to becoming a higher self-esteemed version of yourself.
So basically, don't burn yourself. Don't, don't don't dwell on your sadness. Seek advice or help yourself in any way you want.
Yeah, and there's a process as well, right? So it's not about like, because people talk about positive thinking and it's almost like, well, I shouldn't feel this way. That's not what I'm saying. Is like, yeah, when my fiance passed away, there was obviously a lot of grief there, a lot of sadness, a lot of tears, that sense of like, physically she's gone. Now, spiritually I'm very much connected with her. And that was another lesson I realized, is that consciousness continues beyond the body. But that's the thing with low self-esteem too, is often we feel like our life's not going in the direction that we'd prefer it to go, or we feel like I'm stuck, this is a dead end. But understanding life goes on, like we exist, we're supported always. And to feel like we're not supported means fundamentally we must be supported, because we're making that choice consciously or unconsciously to feel unsupported. But you can only do that from a place of being supported.
Mm.
So when people really tap into the truths about reality and they understand it, how it actually works, not how they think it works, then there's really no reason to be upset or unhappy. But we still have that period sometimes of grieving or low energy, or just allowing that kind of healing process to happen. And that's perfectly natural, and that's perfectly part of the journey.
Mm-hmm. Nice. I wanted to ask you about um, personal development. Personal development is something that, especially in business, there is a lot of talk about personal development. Is it what steps we need to take to do that, and what is personal development in business?
Yeah, that's an amazing question as well. And, I think personal development is obviously personal to every individual. So, in the industry today, a lot of it's kind of been commercialized, and it's kind of been like cookie cutter in some respects. I mean, not
Mm-hmm.
everyone is like that, but some of the bigger people kind of take that cookie cutter approach to a degree. And it's to understand, you can definitely work in a greater group capacity. You can impact hundreds, if not thousands of people simultaneously, but understanding that everyone has their own unique piece to the puzzle.
Yeah.
And that's really the idea of it's not so much that you have to form your piece to the puzzle, because that's already set. It's discovering how you fit into the picture and these gifts that God has given us, if you will, and how that divine nature is already in us, but we have the opportunity to unlock it. And so it's very much not a cookie cutter process. And there are some basic principles or tenets, I suppose, that are true for everyone, but in how we're experiencing them and expressing them can be quite dramatically different from one person to the next. So that's how I would define personal development, is really that self-discovery of who you are at the deepest core, knowing yourself at the deepest core, and then realizing how you fit into the bigger picture of life to serve other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
totally.
then in terms of the business side, right, how does it correlate with business? I think the two go hand in hand, because in business, it's all about relationships. It's all about connection predominantly. There's some businesses that, try to avoid the human element, but it's not really possible.
Mm.
And certainly in this industry, it's all about the relationships. So how do we nurture those relationships in the most authentic way? For me, is the whole idea of development. And so when we know ourselves at a pure level and we're really honest with who we are with ourselves, and we express that with transparency to others, that's what allows business to flow. So the money aspect of business is just the byproduct of having integrity and trust and honesty in what we're doing. And then obviously we have our own unique specializations in business. So obviously I'm, coaching or mentoring or teaching, and everyone else has their own unique skill set. But how that's expressed when it's coming from the heart, that to me is the essence of personal development in the business world.
Great, great. Oh my goodness, so much information and so much we have to take on. But yeah, that's how we get to know ourselves, and by knowing ourselves, like you said, to the purest, that's when we can help others. Otherwise, there is this blockage, and we can't do that because it just feels unnatural.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, that's really what it all is about. But at the same time, we don't have to be perfect. And I think that's another challenge that people have when they're getting started is they feel like they got to do all this learning first. And I disagree with that approach. I think you want to learn a little bit, obviously, enough to like move forward. But when you have that little next step, you just take it. And that
Yeah.
idea of the 1,000-mile journey begins with the first step. So every day you could be taking that first step towards the next version of you. And so there's no waiting period, and you don't have to look perfect. And that's the beautiful thing about what we're now with like Zoom. Everybody's on Zoom. So, a couple of years ago, some people may have felt like, hey, I need to look really good. I need to have my camera good, lighting good. And it's like, just as long as it's good enough, as long as it's presentable,
That's
you're
true.
good to go.
Yeah, that's true. Totally true. I hear a lot about leveling up. What are your thoughts, and what is leveling up?
Yeah, well, from my perspective, it's about understanding that where we are right now is absolutely perfect and we don't need to change it. There's nothing wrong with who we are right now,
Mm-hmm.
but understanding that a basic principle of life is that everything will continue to evolve and change as well, simultaneously. So the two, as much as it seems like a paradox, because the human definition of perfection is like it doesn't need to be changed,
No.
right? And it's like perfect the way it is, but that's really not true. That's not a pure definition. Perfection means it's perfect as it is right now, but life itself is going to obviously continue to evolve. That's inevitable, and allowing the next moment to be perfect and the next moment to be perfect. So leveling up is just understanding that we're always evolving and growing, and that's just in our DNA. That's who we are. So it's not like you have to try to level up as long as you're allowing yourself to move forward in life, right? But we're also always satisfied with where we're at because it is a perfect moment, right? And there's nothing we can do to change it anyway. So if we just allow it to automatically evolve and transform, then we know that we can be in that perfect space, perfect flow moment, because all we can do is accept it, appreciate, allow it, and then with whatever we're inspired to do with it, that's what allows it to evolve into the next moment and the next experience. So that to me is what leveling up is all about, isn't being that state of allowing life to just evolve in and of itself, but obviously participating in the way that we're inspired to.
Yeah, yes, it is. Last time we've spoken about the fear of scaling up or upscaling. Um, Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I think fear is the biggest inhibition for most human beings. And it's just that fear of the unknown, because with our conditioning in human society, whether it's the Western Hemisphere or in Europe or even on the Eastern Hemisphere, there's a lot of structure built in to how people are living their lives. And so they grow up kind of knowing what this pathway is, but inevitably at some point in their life there's no more way to know what's going to happen. And particularly people on the spiritual journey, is the whole point is to enter the unknown. And the beautiful thing about entering the unknown is that we can only discover a greater part of who we are. But often for people, because they've never really embraced that experience fully, initially they have that trepidation or fear about scaling up their life, scaling up their business. I've never done this before. And even if someone else has done it, they did it in their own unique way. So sometimes those doubts of like, just because they did it doesn't mean that I can do it. And that's not necessarily true. But what is true is that you're probably not going to do it in the same way they did it, right? Because again, it's not a cookie cutter experience here, despite as much security as there is in that for the human mind and the human conditioning. You really can't even create a cookie cutter experience because fundamentally we're all unique human beings. So by embracing that and understanding, hey, my life is unique and unique things will transpire, but I'm always supported, that's really what allows people to evolve beyond the fear-based mindset.
Great. Can you tell us a little bit about the therapy that people require to help themselves, with fear of either, upscaling or fear of being, I don't know, being known. Some
Yeah.
people are scared to be famous. Some people are scared for, you know, they have a fear of money. There's plenty of fear in the world now, is fear of death, because also with COVID, so many people are gone. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the idea of how do you actually break through the fear is in itself a process, and to think that like it's just I got to do something one time, or I have to like do this all the time, or I have to work on myself all the time. There's a lot of different limitations that people put on themselves even to get started in the process. And so in my experience, the process of letting go of fear is a journey in and of itself. So there's no point necessarily where I never have fear, now I can live my life, right? It's an ongoing thing, but layer by layer, you can be letting go of that as you take action. So the biggest way to overcome fear is just to take those action steps. But you're not always capable of doing that because sometimes you don't necessarily know what the action step is because there's a lot of layers of fear masquerading over it. So the environment that I've created for my students, we utilize a process called gamma breathing. And gamma breathing essentially puts the brain into this gamma brainwave state where it's now more malleable, more transformable, more easily molded to a right-minded perception, if you will, a perception that's more positive, more holistic in its viewpoint. So it's from that perspective, Edith, that it's much easier to overcome the fear. And the whole idea is that fear is not a real thing in the sense it's not a fact. It's based on a belief, having a fear-based definition of the world. And so it's like having a pair of glasses that are a little bit darkened or sometimes really darkened. And the darker they are, the harder it is to see with clarity. So
Mhm.
the process of gamma breathing allows that perspective to literally lighten up and see through that veil. And then the next action steps in terms of becoming the greatest version of you, those action steps become obvious.
Wow, really lovely. We're coming to the end of our interview. Um, tell our audience what's your gift for them.
Yeah, so every Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, I host a live masterclass. It's free to attend, and it's about an hour and a half to 2 hours, and we dive deep into this work. So obviously, I've been describing it, describing my journey, describing a bit of the process. No doubt people are feeling the vibration and could feel that level of consciousness and transformation as I'm speaking. But when you're actually in the arena of transformation and I'm facilitating that process for you, it's a much deeper experience. So for anyone that's very curious or even a little bit curious about what is it like to live with a broader perspective, a lighter perspective, being happier, lighter, and more free in their lives, then I definitely encourage you to come check out the master class because I will be facilitating that process for you. And it's very easy and natural and fine. In fact, you'll probably find that it's one of the most natural things you've ever participated in. And that's exactly why I do it, because it's so liberating and it really gets us in touch with that natural essence of who we truly are.
Hmm, how exciting. Who doesn't want to be happy? So,
Oh,
yes,
exactly.
I think everyone wants to be happy. Everyone wants to enjoy life and be clearer on their journey, or on the next steps, or even for moms, how to manage both the household and run their business. So you also have to have that clarity um, and schedule everything. So yeah. Uh, any final advice for moms in business?
Yeah, well, I think, it's a big responsibility being a mom and managing a business, and no matter the age of your child, there's different levels of development in that. So it's kind of like a supercharged pathway to personal growth when you're doing both simultaneously. And so to really be kind to yourself and compassionate with yourself along the way. And my late fiance, she has a 24-year-old son, so I'm very familiar with the journey of motherhood and what that looks like and all of its challenges. And it's an amazing opportunity simultaneously. So by putting yourself in the environment of love and compassion and transformation, which is again what we host every Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern time in the masterclass, that will give you the greatest advantage to succeeding in the way that you prefer to succeed, and in having that level of clarity and authenticity in everything that you do.
Great. It was a pleasure to have you here. And thank you for the wonderful advice that you have given our audience and myself. Thank you, Mathew, for your time.
Thank you kindly, Edith. It's been a great pleasure, and thank you so kindly.